gaming has existed for a while, and that's an understatement. And over the years, gaming has changed a lot. Some good, and some bad. Though a few can get a bit, divisive. One of the main cases being certain control methods. Before we begin, I'd like to ask that we keep any and all discussions civil, okay? Okay. So, one of the things that has changed about gaming is how we interact with the games. Back in the day, a lot of games were controlled with a joystick, though nowadays a controller like this is more commonplace, with other control form factors being available depending on the platform you're playing on. Motion controls being a type that has become a bit more prevalent starting with the Wii. Yes, you heard me right, prevalent. The idea of using motion in a more involved manner than just using your fingers has actually been around for much longer. The earliest instance I was able to date was 1976, with Sega's Heavyweight Champ arcade cabinet. It featured these boxing gloves that you had to move in order to punch. I'll be honest, I didn't know this existed till doing research. Though a more potentially well-known example would be the NES Power Glove in 1989, or the Sega Activator in 1993. But okay, back on track. Motion controls. Like them or hate them, they can allow for some things other control schemes can't really do, or even allow you to do some things quicker than you can with an analog stick. For more info, I'd recommend watching Nerrels' videos on the subject. He can put it into words way better than I probably could. So, yeah, just watch those instead if you want more info about how motion controls can improve stuff. However, for motion controls to fully be able to be taken advantage of, there's one thing that needs to be there. Options. And I'm not just referring to the options to be able to enable and disable them when applicable, though that is a very important thing. Having options whenever available is a very important thing, even just to turn the thing off, but we're looking beyond just toggling motion on and off, or the sensitivity of the motion. What I'm referring to is a problem that sometimes happened on the Wii, and I've noticed it happening again on the Switch. With applicability to VR being unknown to me, I don't have a way to play VR, but if you play VR and you've noticed it, please let me know. I'd like to hear it. Hand preference options. While the world is largely considered to be right-hand dominant, heck, my grandma on my mom's side tried to have my mom force me to be right-handed. Kinda ironic considering she really liked The Legend of Zelda, but I digress. The current consensus that I can find that's fairly recent as of this recording suggests that left-handed people make up about 10% of the world population. Granted, this info might already be outdated, but it's the best I got to work with. I couldn't really find anything newer than that info in my research, and really, it's a hard thing to actually fully what would you say? It's not diagnose, it's gather data for it, let's just leave it at that. Now, I first remember seeing gameplay of the Wii version of Twilight Princess, and noticing how Link was right-handed. My assumption was just that the person playing the game was right-handed, and that when starting a new game there would be an option for hand preference. There wasn't. This was slightly disappointing, but nothing caused problems at this point due to it just being a port of the GameCube version of the game, which I didn't know existed for a while. I only knew about the Wii version, so when I did find out about the GameCube version, it kind of made a bit more sense to me. Fast forward to E3 2010, and we got a first look at Skyward Sword. A game that relied on the Wii Motion Plus to be able to do one-to-one sword movement. With this info, I was positive that there would have to be some sort of option for hand preference. One-to-one swordplay is one of this game's main selling points. They wouldn't leave something like that out, right? Well, unless you never really cared about Zelda, you probably already know the answer. Come December 2011, I got the game only to be surprised that there wasn't an option for hand preference. Unlike Twilight Princess, this time there were some problems though. With the player being able to have full control over how you slash your sword, direction is very important. The diagonal slashes being where problems lie the most, as the way you go about performing the slashes differ between right and left-handed people, meaning that it's very possible to run into some awkward animations because the game was not built with left-handed people even considered. Animations may have been the only thing I encountered, though I have talked to fellow left-handed people that have had a bit more troubles. Now, there is one thing to keep in mind. Skyward Sword doesn't need you to move your whole arm in order to slash your sword. Usually a flick of the wrist is enough of a gesture for the Wii Motion Plus to recognize intent. Not having this knowledge is probably one reason why even right-handed people had troubles at times. So it's a bit tricky to know if there was another problem specific to left-handed people. You may have heard rumors of Skyward Sword potentially coming to Switch, and while I don't really seek out or think of rumors, and any I do catch wind of, I don't think of with much more than a would be cool but I'm not getting my hopes up. Though for Skyward Sword, there is another thing. They need to do it right. And currently, I can't trust Nintendo to do it right. Motion control is an integral part of Skyward Sword. It would be very hard to find a way to make it work with a standard control scheme, and I don't see Nintendo doing something like that. What Nintendo would need to do for a Switch release is a left-handed mode, most likely meaning Link's model would be mirrored to make it happen. Though I can't really expect Nintendo to put in the effort to do that. And one of the main reasons for it, besides the fact that they didn't do it for the original version of Skyward Sword, is because of Super Mario 3D All-Stars. Within this anniversary collection, Mario Galaxy uses gyro for the pointer, with a catch. If playing with Joy-Cons, only the right Joy-Con gyro is used for this, and there's no option to change it, just like there is no options to go back to the original camera controls in 64 and Sunshine, which is also a very odd decision that they did. But if Nintendo won't do it for something as simple as a pointer, I don't have much faith they'll do it for Skyward Sword. Another game that's problematic for left-handed people is Metroid Other M. Yeah, I know. Other M is a divisive game amongst Metroid fans, but is important to bring up in this instance. Other M just uses the Wii Remote. No nunchuck functionality, just the Wii Remote. Most of the time, you're using it sideways, but to use stuff like missiles or grapple beam, you need to switch to first-person view, which requires you turn the Wii Remote to an upright angle. And if you are left-handed and are someone that uses the wrist strap on the Wii Remote, it's extra problematic to turn the Wii Remote upright and hold it in your left hand when the strap is on your right hand, because you spend most of your time with a sideways Wii Remote. Super Paper Mario also has a similar problem to this, though you can avoid most instances in that game. Still not a good situation though, it's still very problematic. Now, some of you might be saying, well, why don't you just hold the remote in your right hand? It's not that simple. I wouldn't be telling a right-hand person to just put the DS stylus in their left hand when playing Mario 64 DS because the touchscreen is arguably the best way to control the characters. Because that would go against their muscle memory. You can't expect me to use my right hand for using the remote because it's not natural for me. And the same thing goes for using separate Joy-Cons. When the Switch version of Okami HD was first announced, I was fearing the worst with how the gyro controls would be handled, only for me to be surprised that they actually had options for what Joy-Con to use for it. And that's where the problems lie. We've gotten to the point where an option that you would think would be a no-brainer for games that could use it, like Skyward Sword, is something that ends up being something that's a surprise. Oh hey, they remembered left-handed people existed and bothered to account for it, instead of something that's expected. Now, you might be wondering, why is this even a big deal? And if that's the case, first off, thanks for listening to me talk for so long. And the reason this is a big deal is because some experiences can only be done with motion controls, meaning that it's important for the options to exist whenever applicable. And as the technology develops, the importance of this option will only increase. When there's a unique controls form factor, like with the Switch's Joy-Cons, or VR, it's very important. Motion controls may be a bit niche at the moment, but that doesn't mean that this is something that should be ignored. I hope I've been able to explain everything well enough. This is something that's important to me, and I felt like I had to talk about it. Granted, I'll be honest, I'm not the best at explaining things a lot of the times. I do my best, but yeah, no, I can only explain things so well. Thanks for taking the time to listen to me, and I'll see you guys next time.
Nerrels